Thank you everyone for joining us today at the Rosham Regeneration Summit. I'm here with a very diverse and dedicated group of cannabis industry leaders who are primarily focused on industrial hemp development. However, each individual is out there making a positive impact on their local communities, their regions, and the world in their own unique ways. And it is my privilege to introduce you to all of them today as we explore how hemp and hemp innovation and aligned impact-focused finance can drive forward positive impact across the hemp industry, and also when it comes to the overall industrial applications of hemp across a wide range of sectors. With that being said, I'd like to start with introducing Marty Clemons, because she was actually one of the ideators behind this conference. She was one of the first people I talked to when I thought of putting together a virtual conference that would provide a platform for the real leaders of the regenerative movement globally, for women and people of color who were already out there making positive change and didn't necessarily need someone to say that, oh, we are here to empower them, or that we're going to give them the platform that they don't have, but simply that we're going to recognize them for what they're already doing and bring people together for active collaboration. And that's ultimately the goal of this summit, is to facilitate that active, mutually beneficial collaboration after we've all been here together for these 3 days. Marty, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm so excited that you have done all of this to put all of us together. It's really important right now as we see everything that's going on our planet. You know, we need to grow and evolve as a species. And one of the biggest things with that is we need to learn how to collaborate. And those of us who see regeneration and soil health as one of the lowest hanging fruits for addressing climate change need to work together, and we need to educate capital about what regenerative agriculture is. And for those of us who work in the hemp space, we need to look at how do we get the power of this plant into regenerative agriculture. And I don't know of any other plant that has so many uses and that still has so many hurdles from the regulatory standpoint to really being able to put this plant to use. So my background is as a securities lawyer. I worked at the SEC in Chicago for most of my career. And I got involved in the cannabis space as an investor in medical cannabis in Illinois, and learned about medical cannabis, and really was looking at it as a social justice play. Primarily, I invested in one of the only awardees for cultivation and dispensary that was 51% minority owned, and really saw how cannabis has used and been weaponized. And so I'm really interested in how we develop a cannabis industry that focuses on regeneration and focuses on social justice. And from what I'm seeing, you know, the industry is going to go the way of every other industry and become extractive if those of us that are leading this industry are not speaking out against the companies that are creating extractive cannabis companies. And so that's primarily my interest. I moved to North Carolina 5 years ago. I saw what was going on with cannabis here, and it was hemp, and it wasn't medical. And I learned about hemp, and I became about 10 times more excited about the potential for hemp than medical cannabis. And so I've focused on building the industry here for the last 5 years, working with farmers like Bert, who has if we don't get Bert, he's organized about 100 farmers into a hemp co-op called BioRegen Co-op. He's kind of expanding out beyond just hemp into the regenerative agriculture space. But it's been the farmers who funded the program here in North Carolina, looking because they're desperate for a new cash crop. So I'm starting to see a tipping point with farmers that have been growing conventionally, that as the benefits of regenerative agriculture start becoming more widely known in farmer communities. And so I'm super excited about that aspect. And I'm really excited about how do we grow hemp for fiber, combining it with different rotations and foods, and build soil health. So that's me in North Carolina, in Durham. I'm in Durham, North Carolina.
Thank you, Marty. And since you mentioned Bert, I will spotlight Bert and
There's Bert
with his introduction. So there's no need for me to be in the middle. Just keep the flow going.
Very good. I'm a little further east than Marty. I'm in Bethel, North Carolina, which is just outside of Greenville. We're a popular part of the state that's starting to grow. And as Marty mentioned, I saw, I'm a crop consultant first and a farmer. So I saw the need for change as a steady progression over 20 years. And it got more and more dire in my mind with technology failing, chemistry failing, and basically Mother Nature asking for a different strategy is what I gathered. So I started pursuing this more no-till regenerative approach to agriculture with some of my partners and people that I work for. And then hemp came along, which, as we all know now, was this just massive wave of energy and anticipation. And in a lot of ways, we're 5 years down the road in our state, but as an industry, if I'm being honest, we are now where I thought we were 5 years ago. So it's very fresh, very new. A lot of lessons have been learned now. And so we're now trying to gather ourselves up with this new knowledge and almost new reality. And it seems like hemp and this regenerative agriculture conversation, they're more important than ever. And so it's really fantastic to see all this energy starting to circle around the movement. So as Marty said, I'm a member of and treasurer of Bioregion Co-op, founding member. Is still sitting there at idle. If I'm being very candid, hemp was not as kind to us as I had hoped it might be. So we've got a lot of guys now that are really paying attention to what the next steps are. And as Marty said, basically it's time to transition. Hemp can't bear the weight of this entire movement. And a lot of people tried for that to be the case, but that's not the case at all. So I love the fact of regenerative agriculture being this all-encompassing approach to the industry that we all know now. No matter what your politics are or your mindset on the climate and what it needs, at the end of the day, it represents a more efficient model to produce the goods that we consume every day. So it's hard to argue against regenerative agriculture, which should hopefully make it a little bit easier path than some of the other things we've pursued. So in addition to Bioregion, I do farm, I do maintain the consultancy, and more recently, I have embarked on the path of a brand, Root to Flower, which basically highlights whole plant utilization, where we would like to break down each plant in the supply chain and make sure that there's a market for it. That makes a lot of sense with hemp, as we saw the medicinal side kind of rise and fall. Sometimes we forget how important it still is and the opportunity that it still provides. But a long story short, we now really need the fiber and the food aspect of that plant to rise, to the occasion, to make it economical. And as Marty said, so that we can grow it in a more regenerative way versus the plastic culture. And to get a crop established, you have to disc it and really make the land like this fluffy. It's not the way we want to see it planted. So I'm real happy to see a little bit more focus on how that plant gets established. But beyond that, I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very thankful for the introduction, and I'm excited to see what this group can put together.
Thank you. And just to kind of add on to the concept of developing regenerative agriculture, I'd like to hear from David. So David, if you want to go next with your intro and just add in a little bit about how you see the concept of regenerative agricultural development happening and how you see it being funded ultimately, because I think that's where the gap is in the funding as well. So just mention it a little bit and then we'll go into questions if everyone can just type up any questions that come up so that you can start asking questions of each other as well.
Hello, my name is David Hess. I am the founder and president of Trust Capital. Trust Capital is a boutique strategic private investment firm embedded at the core of the global cannabis sector, originating and managing investments for high net worth, family office, and institutional investors. And we invest strictly in the cannabis industry and have been doing so for about a decade. And we work really closely with our portfolio companies, have a great track record of impactful industry leaders. And we're really excited to be here. And, you know, one of the main issues that keeps coming up for me is really the economic effect, as Bert was talking about and suggesting that we really need to start seeing on sustainable practices. And once we do that, I think we're going to start seeing quite a bit more investment from the investment community. And one of my goals in introducing and highlighting the sustainability and impactfulness in our industry is to introduce this to the investment community. And one of the ways I intend on doing that with Trust is to begin allocating capital and really tranching those allocations out based on impact and the measurement of the impact. And I believe once we start doing that, we'll really start to see, number one, we'll be able to relate and share the story to our shareholders and other stakeholders in the industry well before that, you know, the economic ROI, the economic return, which generally speaking, especially for us on the private side, isn't for, you know, 7 to 10 years or longer. We invest primarily in the long term. So for us, we certainly look at the regenerative efforts and sustainability and impact as the return on our investment as well. And we're equally excited about that. And but it really does need to be measured. And as far as I see our job, it is really to incentivize the operators. And I think part of that is going to be tranching out that capital.
I just want to give a little bit of feedback to that. Thank you so much, David. And what I find particularly inspiring about this opportunity is that we're here together among the first, if not the first, to actually start implementing impact-linked tranched capital as part of the development of the cannabis industry. So, for example, Professor Ani Patton-Power, actually, sorry, I have to redo that. I'm not sure if she's a professor, but Ani Patton-Power, who is a fellow at Oxford University and an impact investing educator, really pioneered the idea of impact-linked tranches and was recently looking for examples of this for her book. And there haven't been any examples in the cannabis industry yet. So I'm really excited to work collaboratively with Trust and between the Sheffer Regeneration Fund and how we link the deployment of capital to the realization of integrated impact and financial outcomes to how Trust will be deploying capital as well. So I hope that we can work together and put forward the first case study, hopefully in collaboration with Marty as well, and Cycle Effect Ventures, and provide examples that not only is this possible, but that it is going to form part of best practices moving forward when it comes to investing in the development of a cannabis and hemp industry that is sustainable for the long term. Because I think that all of us here are in this business for the long term to create legacy businesses, to work for and develop these types of initiatives for future generations and for the long-term benefit of the entire planet as opposed to just short-term financial returns. And ultimately, this focus on impact financial integration can actually drive greater financial returns. And that's the type of data that we're seeing come from the public capital markets. That being said, I'd like to hear from the farmers in terms of, can we explore this idea that we need a large amount of capital to get going? Is that necessary for the industry? Or can we really do this independently and retain control over how we develop our businesses and create solutions and create brands in-house? So I'd like to hear from Rachel and Jesse about their journey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Smedberg. I am the founder of Tulip Tree Gardens. Thank you, Miriam, for having us. This is super humbling, from where we started and where we are today. To start really, what we do and what our company stands for is we're driven by a purpose. And it always has been that from the start. And that purpose is really to regenerate soil, to improve the locality of our community and all that dwell in it. And we just believe in the healing power of what nature provides. I think that's why we had jumped into an industrial hemp. We are a vertically integrated farm, so we cultivate the industrial hemp, we process it here, and then we have branded products as well. So that diverse profit center allows us to make more of an impact, not only on the soil health, but also on the community level. We have sustained organic growth through this whole thing. We did not sought out large investment. We knew that when we jumped into this market 18 months ago, that the market would look different with being a new industry, with new regulations. We knew that the market would look differently. So we decided to take an organic growth start. And with that, we've been able to innovate and adjust to the market. We didn't have big time investors over our head telling us that we need to make this next step. In turn, in regards to even COVID, we've all went through COVID, but with having that organic growth, we were able to make those innovations and make those steps that were allowed to keep our company afloat. Jesse.
Yeah. My name's Jesse, Vice President here at Tulip Tree Gardens. I work primarily in lab operations and in the field with regard to soil and cultivation technique. I think there's a big wave of understanding happening across the market. I think a lot of people thought that it required millions to get into the market. I think a lot of people assumed that it was going to require massive equipment and a great deal of outside investment in order to launch even a grow operation. You see a lot of it in cannabis because the regulatory environment in cannabis just requires a little bit more money, certainly, than hemp. But we approached this from an organic growth perspective. We didn't see an advantage in going out and soliciting a lot of the early money that you saw moving around in hemp. We knew it was a race to the bottom on price. We felt comfortable that in the Midwest, where we're at, with the soils that we have, we felt comfortable that we would be able to withstand any race to the bottom price-wise, that we would be fine with that. So, but what we knew we couldn't do it while being beholden to a large investor. And I think you see a lot of that in the market right now and some of the sufferings that are happening. I think the greatest lesson that we've learned is that doing it yourselves and with a tremendous amount of grit and will and just grinding out day after day is really the most valuable thing you can bring to your company, more than money, more than anything else. If it's a 9 to 5 thing, probably not going to happen. But if you're willing to put in 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., then absolutely organic growth in a hemp space can absolutely happen. And the ability, like Rachel said, to react to market changes, like when COVID happened, you know, the ability to immediately react to a market change without having a large bureaucratic structure above us or a large presence of where we just have to ask people what to do. It wouldn't have made it possible. We were able to, you know, bring in hand sanitizers into the lab operations, you know, within a week of finding out that, finding out that it was running out across the country. So we were able to bring in, you know, an immediate impact into the community through, you know, just giving away all the sanitizer, which then all of a sudden contributed to the other profit centers of the company as well, because people are asking questions, who is this and who's that? And I think really with regard to being able to make a company work without large investment, that's really where the biggest bang for the buck is going to be, is in the local community, addressing local needs right now, not necessarily waiting for the big giant picture down the road. What can we do right now to make a big impact today, and the whole while working towards the larger goals that are obviously coming. That's kind of the approach that we took, and we've been able to operate a lab on tremendously low power. I think we're probably the most sustainable lab in the country. We operate on less than 100 amps of power. So this is the type of lab setup that can be done in the middle of a desert. It's a super sustainable way to run. We run cover crops. We don't use plastic culture or plastic mulch. We've got a till stripping operation that seems to be pretty regenerative with our soil so far. Yeah, we're just really excited to be here. So that's a little bit about us. Hopefully I answered your question.
Absolutely brilliant. I would love to find out more about your lab relatively soon. We'd like to set up our own lab out here as well for our farm. We have a certified organic farm in Serbia, and we started growing hemp last year. So we're looking forward to starting again next year because we missed this season. So we have enough time to work together, and you know, we need your help setting up a lab here. So I'd love to find out more about that process.
Sure.
And we've also got Stephen Cutter with us today. He is all the way, he is joining us all the way from Puerto Rico. And I've got to say, every time I speak with him, I just want to jump in that ocean behind him. So, Stephen, take it away.
Thanks, Miriam. One day you can come down here and we can go for a swim. I guess I got in the industry about 9 years ago when I got into sustainability as one of my main focuses. And Marty touched base on this, that regenerative agriculture for me was one of the lowest hanging fruits to help improve the health of our planet and the people at the same time. And that's kind of when I found hemp as well. And I was blown away then about everything that hemp could do. And I've been an enthusiast, a researcher, a networker, looking for all the people that have been building this space and doing it for not just for the planet, but making sure that it's done in the right way for the people, you know. Like Bert James has been building co-ops around this, and I think that's a great model. And, you know, my own goal is to help develop the framework and ecosystems for this new plant to exist in all new regions, and help bring in the right education and the right networks and the right equipment and resources, so countries know what they're doing, and the regions can step into the industrial space and be connecting with material scientists that can make, you know, hemp homes out of 3D printing concrete that even store energy like a battery, and hemp battery people, and fuel and plastics. And it's quite phenomenal what you can do with this plant. And I wanted to just help showcase to the world how we can bring it to the future.
Thank you, Stephen. Maybe talk a little bit more about your business. So what's next for you? What types of products are you launching, and what are you developing on the business side of things?
So down here in Puerto Rico, we're building an education headquarters. So to teach both local people and travelers how to get into the hemp space, part of that ecotourism, but also how to get into permaculture and vertically integrating your farm, like Rachel and Jesse. And we have our own product line coming out. It's an organic, vegan, nano gummy with one of the top cannabis chefs in the country. And we're going to be pushing those out next week, finally. COVID slowed that down a little bit, but yeah, the whole goal is to showcase how you can vertically integrate a farm. We're looking to shoot a documentary on it, an educational documentary, and we partner with groups like Hemp Academia and such to try to get this message out to as much people as we can.
Thank you, Stephen. I know David had a question, so I'll let David ask. And my idea for this is that when he asks his question, that Jesse can answer first, then Bert, and then we'll come back to Marty about approaches to financing these types of initiatives. And then we can also hear from David again on what his take is. How do we bring finance into the mix as well?
This is really exciting for me to be able to have such a great panel of hemp producers, manufacturers, to be able to really learn from. And one of my questions is, first off, can you, and I know Jesse, you started to, and Bert and Stephen as well, but can you go into a little bit what some of the differences between a sustainability and a regenerative, practices at a hemp farm for us, as capital to come in and really, what are some of the things that we would notice, number one, especially from those that sort of, walk the walk versus just simply talking the talk, right? We see a lot of people talking about it, but, how do us as, those providing capital and investment really understand the differences between those who are just walking and talking. And, then we can go ahead and as Miriam described, go into some other questions about how we can help.
Maybe if you just want to rephrase that, David, if you want to just at the end just say something like, how do we as capital coming in bring the impact management idea into our due diligence process? So when we're doing our due diligence, how do we tell who's really sustainable and who's just claiming to be?
So the real question is for the hemp producers and manufacturers on the panel is, when we're doing our due diligence, how do we best do our due diligence, right? How do we know, where to allocate capital when it comes to regenerative farming and sustainability, and who has best practices?
Sure. Yeah, I think with a regenerative model, I think what you would see walking into a regenerative model, as opposed to even a lot of organic models out there that are still monocrop, is you're going to see diversity. You're going to see a lot of diversity, and that's not only in the plant species and even including livestock on the farm, but you're going to see diversity in profit centers. Risk aversion is kind of the number one thing here, right? We can't allow any one product or crop to control the future of the farm. A strong diversity allows for failure, but more importantly and more excitingly, it allows for innovation. And I think that's where you get to see a lot of these, for instance, farms that are doing a lot of medicinal oils and medicinal oreganos and basil oils and extractions that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see coming out of a CBD farm, right? You wouldn't expect a farm like ours to, or a hemp farm, to have a hemp processing lab right next to a farm stand that we serve our local community fruits and vegetables out of. But when you look at the regenerative model and how all these different areas of the farm, whether it's pasture and livestock, whether it's honey and beekeeping, or flowers or hemp, all of these things have a synergistic relationship with each other. And they also have that same synergistic relationship with each other in the market. So your go-to-market strategy, I believe, in a regenerative model has to reflect the actual farm itself. And so hopefully that answers your question a little bit better.
Yeah, and to touch on really like our sustainability, our sustainable efforts on the farm, we can talk about cover crop planting. So our farm right now is a 63-acre farm. It was a conventionally farm for over 60 years. So we walked on the property, the micronutrients, we're stripped of the soil. You know, obviously we're in the Midwest, we have soil, you can yield crops here, but we knew that we had to regenerate the soil. So through a variety of cover crop planting, we actually only planted 20% of our field this year because we knew we had to take the other 80% to regenerate and planned out future plans of orchards that again is going to diversify our profit center. We also have vermicompost on our property where we're producing vermicompost able to sustainably fertilize our plants, our hemp plants, our vegetable plants and flower plants. We're also, you know, taking in our neighboring farms horse manure and letting that compost over a year and using that to build a layering system on our raised beds in our field. So we are always looking at ways to be more sustainable, even when it comes to the field, also in the lab as well. And then, you know, in turn, to be as sustainable as possible in our branded products as well. I think the hemp industry, sustainable, regenerative is a hot word right now, right? And I feel as if a lot of people don't even really know what that means. I've seen so many times from really working on the branding side, you know, you have other farmers or other brands share their photos of their field and, you know, they're talking about regenerative agriculture and sustainable agriculture and there's plastic in their field. And we have to realize that this plant is here to save the soil. And I think it's kind of the market and the industry has kind of been contradicting itself. And I think with the methods that we use, and Jesse can kind of dive in more on how we plant cover crop and plant our hemp plants right into the cover crop, and we yield, you know, and pretty incredible yields from our crop by using those planting methods. But yeah, we are striving on a daily basis from every inch of the company to make small changes to be more sustainable and regenerative as well. So.
And Bart, can you tell us a bit about how you define sustainability within the hemp space? And how does someone like David tell the difference between a company that is claiming to be impact focused and sustainable and somebody who is really dedicated to sustainable development?
Well, the first part of that question is a lot easier than the second part of that question. The first answer for the regen sustainability push, I feel personally, because I'm fortunate to have a consultant's background and even more fortunate to deal with farmers on a daily basis. So I'll quickly identify a few quick things I'm doing. You know, right now I'm running numbers. That's the most important thing any of us can do. You know, at the end of the day, farmers are the most diverse business community on the planet Earth, in my estimation. So I'm running numbers on the cost of transition, what that means. You heard Jesse mention they left 80% of their land out for a year. You know, talk to other businesses that can let their, you know, infrastructure just rest. You know, 80% of their asset, just, we're going to give that a break. That's hard to do. And so I think that's what I'd like to see emerge from these conversations. And every conversation I'm in, the message is important. We all share that common goal of doing things in a better way. What's right now missing from that is a very regimented strategy. And at the same time, it's hard to regiment something that is so diverse. You know, regenerative agriculture can mean so many things. So what we're doing is, you know, looking at, instead of spraying chemicals on a field, what does it cost to put a fence on it and allow a herd of cattle to cross over it and take care of the weed problem? At that point, it's not a problem. The weed becomes, you know, a benefit. So that's a very small example. Cover crops I feel are the most easy to implement step that anybody can take, even in a monoculture. You know, whether you agree or disagree with that, if you add cover crop, that can bring at least some diversity for a portion of that year to that system. So aside from the planning, the economics are most important, and really quick to scale what I know to be true. A cover crop right now, if you buy at volume, is going to range between $20 and $50 an acre, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So that is a serious investment, and to date, is starting to emerge, but it's so new, and the energy is so new. The benefits of that and the measurements of that, and if you take that to a farmer and say, well, just like David as an investor, well, how am I going to get that $50 back? That's serious capital, and you have to spend that capital now. So we're getting ready to spend that money in October when we won't even begin to plant the crop until April. So you see that there's your gap. There's where some of your capital might come in and help influence the farmer's decision, even if it is a return on that cover crop. If you helped him pay for a portion of that and then got your money back at the end of the crop with some reasonable percentage, farmers borrow money all the time. It will be no different. So that's what I'm doing now, for sustainability. Marty knows this, but I'm transitioning my family farm. I've whittled it way down to a manageable size. And so now I'm running numbers on that farm from one end to the other and trying to take the most strategic approach to transition as possible, with what we all know to be a very embattled price and market system. So the diversity that we need to pursue, that's a little bit shaky as well. I've tried to engage my Eastern North Carolina brethren and sisters for a long time, and they're very quick to send you a message and say, hey, this is great, but then they send you that message and go to the grocery store and buy the cheapest thing they can put their hands on. And so that is also something we need to work on. I'm getting away from the field now, but that would go to Marty's court and David's court later in this conversation. Real from not real, man, that you can hear the sincerity in Jesse when he speaks. So likely it's not gonna be a bunch of paperwork like organic farmer. Whatever happened to that industry, it went in the wrong direction, and it's not even our friend necessarily currently. Organic production requires a massive amount of tillage. A lot of chemicals are, OMRI certified that, could be argued one way or the other, they're not regenerative. So there's another, big conversation to hold, is, how are we going to go for that high road of organic and regenerative? That's going to be a new and fun conversation to have. But at the end of the day, the authenticity will come from conversations. I used to tell people that at the farmer's market, it's like, no, I'm not certified organic, but I'm right here. Ask me anything you want to know, and I'll be very candid and tell you what you need to hear, or not what you need to hear, but the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. So that would be my quick answer. Would be a lot more farmer engagement, interaction, and quick little video snippets like that. Most times you'll learn what you need to know from that farmer direct, and that would empower his voice, right? Instead of a bunch of investors and people trying to not knocking Indigo Ag. I see you, Stephen. Kudos to them and their initiative, but they got like $800 million to work with. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how much of that comes to the farm and to farmers. So that's probably enough of my win for this answer.
Thank you so much, Britt. That was very insightful. And on that note, with regard to investment and how much of that actually gets to the farm, Stephen, can you jump in a little bit and talk to us about what you're currently raising funding for? And I've got it. Sorry, guys. All right.
That's me.
Small rural village in Serbia that's about 20 minutes from town. And so there's a lot of tractors going back and forth. I need a soundproof room to be able to film videos like this. All right, let me start over. All right. Thank you so much for your very insightful feedback, Bert. I've certainly learned a lot from you just from this one segment, especially being a farmer myself and having that organic certification. I don't want to be tilling. So here in Serbia, even the concept of farming organically is new, let alone the idea that we don't need to use our tractors. So I'm really looking forward to bringing regenerative organic certification here, at least through our initiative. Russian Impact recently became Serbia's first certified B Corporation on August 5th, and we're very proud of that. And we're also looking forward to our farm becoming the first certified regenerative organic farm in the entire region. Now, I'd like to hear from Stephen in terms of what he's working on right now on the housing level of things, because I've seen his deck, I've seen his business proposition, and I want to know what he's working on when it comes to housing and how he sees the inflow of capital happening with regards to those hemp housing initiatives.
Well, great. The housing has always been a passion of mine. I was a carpenter when I was 16 in high school, and when I discovered you could build out of hemp, and I was like, this is the building material of the future, you know? And not only it stores carbon into the home rather than produces carbon. So if you started using hempcrete rather than regular concrete, you can really look into the value metrics as it expands. And I have 3 different styles of houses that I am looking to build down here as one of the first hemp homes in the Caribbean. There's ones that are structurally engineered panels, and all these houses are going to be modular too. So I think the sustainable housing revolution needs to be modular in order for it to expand quickly. So the Grow Your Own Home program, one of the first homes we're looking to do is a structurally engineered hemp panel. We just stack them up together, build up your walls, but we're going to have them to capture your own rainwater, produce your own energy. And as we roll out the R&D part of some of the higher tech stuff, these walls will also be able to store energy like a battery using Kevlar and graphene. We also have some waste components too. So you can use recycled plastic as a filler instead of sand. If you chop the sand down or the plastic down to the size of sand, you can use most recycled plastics and use that as a filler instead of mining for sand. So with all the solutions that we look into in regenerative practices, you want to find your waste problems and convert them into a positive. And so I try to do that with our housing and with everything we do. And that's some of the housing components.
And just to come back a little bit, in terms of capital, how do you see the inflow of capital? So in terms of accessing aligned financing for these housing initiatives, just tell us a bit about what your experience has been like seeking capital or just what you've seen happening. Is there money available to finance hemp housing?
So anytime you start a new industry, it's kind of fun. So there's not too many hemp houses or hemp house manufacturing in the world. So everyone wants to see a use case. You know, everyone wants to see the demo. They want to see it exist. So when you're pioneering a new space, you have to go through some hurdles. You have to innovate and you have to be quick on your feet. I haven't actually put too much attention, thinking about it now, specifically just towards the hemp house, but our team and I have been talking about doing a crowdfunding initiative to build the first hemp house down here in Puerto Rico. And so I guess that's one of my passions too, is figuring out how to get micro investment into the space instead of just macro. So even imagine a hemp crowdfunding TV show where instead of the panelists are the investors, it'd be the audience. So looking to democratize the micro investments into the hemp space, and I think we'll probably look to do that for the house for the first one, and I'll be speaking on that on the Green Finger channel September 18th next week as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Stephen. All right. Let me just come back in here. Now, coming back to due diligence and investment a little bit, Marty, can you tell us about what you've seen happen when it comes to allocating capital towards initiatives such as regenerative agriculture and potentially even innovative housing. What is the due diligence process like at your fund, and what has it been like historically? How is it different when you're doing impact-focused due diligence compared to traditional due diligence on investments that are more mainstream?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about my involvement with Cycle Effect Regenerative Ventures, which is a hybrid venture capital company based in Boulder in New York City. That was started to be a multi-stakeholder cooperative. And so each portfolio company actually owns a piece of the fund. And the idea was, it was started by Chris Lindstrom and Amanda Pinelli. And the idea was to incentivize collaboration between portfolio companies. And I believe Jesse mentioned it. What you're really creating is an ecosystem, right? You're creating an ecosystem for portfolio companies in the regenerative space. Because they are typically doing things that no one else is doing, they don't have a support network. So the idea was that, and about $1 million was deployed into a portfolio of companies across textiles, cannabis, I can't remember some of our other sectors. But the idea was that we would be investing in companies that could help each other grow. And as they did so, they would financially benefit by getting a piece of the fund itself. So it was a completely new structure for regenerative finance that's never really been implemented before. And there's been a lot of learnings. I was on the board for about 2 years. I'm still involved with them, but I did step off the board because I really want to focus more on just regenerative agriculture at this point. But I'm still connected to all of them and to the portfolios. And, you know, they have a lot of companies doing a lot of really cool things. Will they do those things in a time period before our planet burns? I don't know. I think it's time that we need to start focusing more on the low-hanging fruit. And the soil health is, to me, the lowest hanging fruit. So if you're an impact investor and your particular interest is climate change, there is no other thing that you're going to get as much bang for your buck as quickly, in my opinion, because you're going to be sequestering a lot of carbon in that soil. And so that can be measured. You can measure organic matter. And so one of the UN SDG goals talks about regenerative agriculture and talks about we have about 60 seasons, and this is a fact that most people do not understand. We have about 60 seasons left of topsoil. That means 60 seasons in which we can cultivate food because we've degraded our topsoil so much. So the point of regenerative agriculture is to rebuild soil health. And we have to understand that as humans, our microbiome is connected to the microbiome of the soil and the earth. If there are no nutrients in the soil, there are no nutrients in your food, no matter how healthy you think you're eating, that food is not nutrient dense. There's research that shows how many apples you would need to eat now to get the same amount of nutrient density that you would that your grandparents ate because soil health. So we have to understand that there's all of our systems are struggling and they're all in collapse, and looking for solutions that are intersectional between many different systems is really important. So if you're an impact investor and you care about climate change and you care about food systems and you care about health, you can get a bang for your buck, a return across climate change, across soil health, through soil health and through human health, right? So we need to start looking at, we got a short period of time. This isn't any longer, maybe someday. We got a really short period of time, in about 10 years to really turn things around. So what you're starting to see now is you're starting to see a lot of big brands recognizing this. They don't have the supply chains. So there's people trying to create supply chains for these big brands to be able to transition, right? So it really depends as an impact investor. Your due diligence is, what are you trying to achieve? If you're only trying to achieve a short-term profit, which has been the typical model that we've used in finance, you won't be able to do that. You won't be able to do that without the planet. There won't be a planet. I said yesterday, I posted, there won't be a stock market. People were talking about, that it's an investable class now, regenerative agriculture. I'm like, yeah, because, there won't be a stock market if there's no planet. And we need to get really real that these are timelines of things where all you have to do is look at California and Oregon and the whole West Coast on fire right now. It's on fire. It's on fire because the soil has been degraded. When the soil is degraded, it doesn't hold moisture. When it doesn't hold moisture, we have that moisture goes in and creates superstorms. You really need to understand the whole carbon cycle, that what's going on with climate change, to understand how regenerative agriculture is a solution. So if I'm going into the cannabis space, which I've been in lots of places in the cannabis space, if I go into a big medicinal grow, do you know how much power and water and resources that big medicinal grow is taking? I said the only way that any of that can be regenerative is if they're using renewable energy. And so there are some people looking at how can I take my leftover CBD stalks to create pyrolysis, to create syngas, to create energy to run my facilities. That's what you need to be looking at if you want regenerative indoor grown anything. And I don't know anybody. I know some people maybe playing around with some of that, but as an impact investor, cannabis is not regenerative, pretty much the way it's typically grown, not at all. So you'll be able to see the people standing out because it's not the typical, I've got an indoor grow, I'm using regular power. It's not regenerative. So looking at people that are trying to innovate, like Jesse and I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. And Jesse, his partner? Oh, you're muted. Rachel. Sorry, Rachel. Sorry. I don't want to just keep saying Jesse because that's the only name I'm looking at on the screen.
I know.
Sorry, it's my computer.
No. Rachel was talking about, she's got the regenerative model down. And, but you really need to understand how all these systems are not silos. All these systems are completely interconnected. And I don't see any impact capital yet that really understands the intersectionality of all these systems. And, I think you could have a whole impact investing firm just focusing on system change instead of sector. It's not sector, it's multi-sector. And so due diligence, I can tell you in the hemp space, in the cannabis space, there are a lot of people in it for the wrong reasons and came into it with a really short-term perspective that this is the green rush and I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm seeing most of those people are getting called out of the herd now. The people that have a long-term view, like Jesse and Rachel, are the ones that are going to last. And especially with respect to that capital strategy, everybody wanted to grow. I've heard this so many times in the cannabis space. I'm going to be the biggest multi-state operator. I'm going to be all of those qualifiers. When people start using that language, I run. If there's no women on their team, I run. There is a lot of women inherently have a more regenerative thinking mindset than men. In a lot of cases, it's not gender specific. But when I see people that have participated in building the extractive capitalist system, just looking into cannabis and thinking it's an interesting sector, that's not who you want to partner with. And I know lots of operations who do want to be regenerative, who have rejected capital over and over and over because they can't find aligned investors that even understand regenerative. So there's a lot of different things going into it, but there's a lot of greenwashing. And I say this almost on a daily basis. I just talked to someone and they're either a genius or they're crazy. And I don't really know which. So I run across a lot of people like that in cannabis that are either a genius or they're crazy, but I'll tell you the due diligence process is a lot longer. I have to really get to know people.
Thank you, Marty. I see that, so Bert had a question. So let's go with Bert, if you want to ask David, so you go ahead and just ask your question. I think it'd be great if you just address it to David.
Yeah, just following up on the.
We can't hear you.
Not sure why I'm unmuted.
I think it's when you move sometimes I can't really hear you. So
Really?
yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to control my ADHD.
No, I just mean like you move away a little bit and then there's a big difference. Like when you're
I
closer
move a lot.
to
That's what it is. So the question is quickly, just brainstorming in the way of a question. It is a good starting point, the scenario I mentioned, where we know that there is a gap. We just identified a pretty significant expenditure to commit to regenerative agriculture in the way of cover crops. I'm sure Jesse and Rachel could add some other inputs that you might want to add to the field as well. Is that a real simple solution? Is that something a finance company may consider short term, just in a traditional input finance scenario with a measured return on that investment? Because farmers sign up for, again, loans all the time. Could they interview and identify a regenerative farm or even just a regenerative practice and finance that one thing short term just to get started?
Okay, so like you cut out a bit. So if you don't mind, I'm going to try to rephrase that a little bit, and then I'll jump in and ask. I'm sorry. I want to make sure that we get the question on record, and I didn't. Half of what you said was not. It wasn't clear at all. So okay, so David. Now, coming back to David Hess, what I'd like to ask is when we look at our goals as investors, what are we investing for? Are we looking at outcomes-based investing? Now, that might be a bit of an extended question, but what I want to hear from you is, have you thought about integrating outcomes-based financing into the way that you invest? So, if you deploy capital, can you look at identifying 1 or 2 or 3 specific regenerative outcomes and then deploying capital in tranches related to the realization of those specific outcomes, and then increase your investment as you see the financial performance moving forward? So to really take not only a patient approach, but a structured patient approach and weave in outcomes-based financing into the way that you invest. Do you think that might be possible, or one of the potential directions that Trust Capital can take?
I mean, I think that's probably the only way to do it. If we were going to do it, would be that structured, method, right? And increasing the allocation as we see that measured results, right? Without that, it would be very, very difficult for us. In particular, we work with not only our capital, but we've got quite a few investors that invest with us. And although they're very much in line with our thinking, the goal is obviously as investors, right, to see that return on capital. However, we want to see the return on the capital while we're doing good, right? And so, absolutely, I think that's very, very possible. And again, frankly, it's probably the only way that we would do it.
Thank you, David. Now we've got, okay, so in terms of, I see that Bert also wanted to ask Marty that question. So let me just go back and I'll just add to it a little bit. All right, so we've heard from David that we can see a outcomes-linked approach become mainstream and that he sees it as being the only way to do it. So I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about how to integrate outcomes-focused financing and start building these impact-linked tranches into our deal flow while explaining to investors that this is a long-term approach and the capital will be deployed in these tranches in accordance with a certain time period when certain impact and financial outcomes happen. How do you see that happening? Do you see it being something that can become acceptable in cannabis and hemp or regenerative agriculture in general? And if yes, how?
So the traditional financing options for farmers has been extremely limited because of the way our agricultural systems have developed. You know, small farmers have a hard time finding financing. We have a lot of small scale farmers in North Carolina. The big farmers have been forced into a big ag model, and the you know, the Farm Bureau that used to keep, you know, essentially you have to understand farm finance is that they're financed for that year for that crop, right? And there's a whole lot of different factors happening where some farmers are starting to make more money selling carbon credits. Therefore, they're becoming carbon farmers. And if you look at legislation in the US, we have Growing Climate Solutions Act now, which would allow farmers to create carbon credits. So I don't think we can look at any of the old models and try to save them. I think we got to start over. And Bert will tell you a lot of farmers are surviving as insurance farmers. They actually make more money when the crop fails and they have crop insurance. So if you look at, there's all these kind of broken systems. I think some farmers can't get crop insurance, I just read, if they're doing regenerative practices. And Bert, you can kind of tell me a little bit about this. But see, this is, you know, we have old entrenched systems that are failing, and the gatekeepers of those systems don't understand these new systems. And so, for example, I built a hemp house and I couldn't get, and I tried to sell it. I did it as just to do it. And the buyers couldn't get a mortgage on it, and they couldn't get insurance on it because it was like, they didn't understand it. This house is going to last 1,000 years. And I was like, you should be paying me because this house isn't going to burn. It's, you know, hemp is the way hempcrete is structured. It doesn't burn. It has a high burn rating. So because we're trying to do something completely new, we have to think about how do we finance this, right? And so there is a lot of innovation going on in the finance sector for farmers and regenerative farmers. So if you look at some of the funds that Miriam has introduced me to, Steward is trying to help finance those farmers. And I presented those deals to typical investors and they'll be like, well, that's really high. Why wouldn't they just go to a traditional finance? I said, because capital's not available to them. You know, so farming is probably one of the most risky endeavors, and farmers are some of the most risk-averse people I've ever met. So, you know, it's just very strange. It's a very strange system. So how do we create a new system that incentivizes this? So one of the outcomes, if you're an impact investor and you care about clean water, you should understand that regenerative agriculture has an impact on the whole watershed of the whole region. So if you have a whole region, so I think we have to look at transitioning regions and financing transition of regions, perhaps, as opposed to individual farms. Or groups of farming co-ops where 100 farmers are going to transition at once. Because what happens with regenerative agriculture is that the farm becomes more profitable and the yield goes up because it's taking a more longer term approach. If you're taking a short-term approach, this is why you need patient capital. You need to look at scale because big brands need supply chains that are not one farm. So if we want to do this transition and we want to do it quickly, we have to do it at scale. So financing, what's happening now is financing individual farmers. We can't do that. We have to finance transitions of a region. And if we've got impact investors that care about watersheds, that transitioning that region, you know what that's going to do to the Atlantic Ocean off Bert, and what it's going to do to the Cape Fear River that dumps into it? Because right now, all those conventional farmers all the runoff from conventional farming is going into those watersheds. So I've seen some innovative stuff where watersheds come together with a local brewery to create a local beer that incentivizes regenerative agriculture. So we have to start looking at way more innovative approaches to this and way bigger approaches to this. And that's going to take capital. But it's got to be educating the impact investors. I spoke at an impact investing conference in Boston in September, talking about hemp. Hemp's not on their radar. Regenerative agriculture is barely on their radar. They're still, investing in all the impact investors there were excited about Beyond Meat and fake meat. And, look, that's not the answer. Like, that is not the answer to some of our most pressing challenges, which is climate change. It's not the answer to cleaning up our planet. Regeneration is about restoring. Sustainability is about maintaining status quo, and the status quo is not at all sustainable. That's why we have to up our game from sustainable to regenerative. And a lot of people saw that like 5 years ago. But it's becoming very greenwashed. And so there's a consultant who works with small food brands, and they wanted organic. And she matched them up with a farmer in Kansas who had been doing regenerative for a long time, but was not organic. And he said, I've built all this soil health. If you want me to transition to organic, I'm going to destroy all the soil health that I created because I'm going to have to till. People don't understand that. They don't understand that it's about transitioning. It's not about either or. It's about both and it's about transitioning large scale regions. And we can invest in that. There's trillions of dollars to be made in transitioning from a extractive fossil fuel based economy to a regenerative plant-based one.
Thank you, Marty. So I see we've got a question from David. David, would you like to jump in and ask your question?
I'm curious. I'm curious. We hear a lot about the Farm Bill, right? That was passed in 2018. I'd like to know from from the actual, hemp farmers and the hemp producers, manufacturers, has that been as impactful as intended? Especially for maybe some of the farmers that are producing different types of product. Some are producing CBD, others are looking to go more the industrial hemp side. Has there been that impact?
Who wants to start? Okay, yeah. I think the Farm Bill was great in that it leveled the playing field to a certain extent with regard to the hemp side of things. I mean, we were already a number of years behind Kentucky and Tennessee here in Illinois. There were some other states that had a head start, but we approached it as more of an opportunity being in a couple of years later when the Farm Bill passed. We were able to take everything that they learned and improve upon that. We were able to learn from their failures, which I think really set us up for success. The issues with the Farm Bill that we see a lot of certainly right now in the United States with regard to processing and the input that the DEA has had with recent clarifications of the bill, there's a lot to be desired still. What we've seen is the fear creep back into the processing side of the market as to what is a allowable crop, what is a not allowable crop, and that's caused, I would assume so, and you can answer better than me. It's caused some concern on the side of investment and apprehension, possibly on the side of processing investment. Because anytime that the DEA issues a clarification of a rule, we now need clarification of the clarification. So there's a lot of fear with that Farm Bill. It certainly needs to be addressed and readdressed. It creates more barriers within the market space between hemp and cannabis that shouldn't necessarily be there. They're very at this with each other right now. If you've noticed in the marketplace, hemp and cannabis aren't really as synergistic as we all idealistically hoped we would be. So yeah, there's a number of issues with the Farm Bill. It's certainly not perfect. The DEA threw a major wrench into the mix here this last couple weeks. And we're all waiting patiently until the end of October to hopefully get some more clarification. But I think maybe you could speak to a little bit on the investor side and maybe apprehension with regard to that as it relates to the Farm Bill, and what type of bill would give an investor confidence or solidarity in vision.
I mean, you nailed it, Jesse. You nailed it. There's so much, that needs to be clarified. And I mean, again, every time we hear, the DEA try to explain what they meant, we just get more confused. And
Right.
so I agree. I don't know if it needs a new bill. I don't know if the MORE Act that's coming up this month, for vote is going to help at all with that. But it's one of the most critical issues when it comes to investment, and what's impeding investors right now is that clarity. And so that's why I ask. There's so much uncertainty for us as investors, and the Farm Bill was intended partly to clear that up and to make it easier for us to invest, and it wasn't. And so I'd love to hear from some of the other panelists, how has it impacted them at all? Stephen, how about you?
I mean, for me, the federal Farm Bill did a couple of things. I mean, you can thank CBD for giving hemp a place in that, and I guess I've seen a lot of groups just try to come in and make some money off the green rush, and for me, I guess I'm in this for the long haul, and I know it's not going to take this short-term money or short-term vision to build out an entire new industry. So I'm very excited about the Farm Bill put into place, but I'm also discouraged about some of the ways they're regulating this plant. This plant no other plant has been in contact with human existence longer than this plant, over 10,000 years. It's one of the first plants we grew as a species on this planet, and they tell us we have to do more testing and more studies on it. I think there needs to be a collective voice saying that enough is enough of treating hemp like a drug, when it's a miracle crop that not only can help heal the soil and clean the water and feed the people and build your home. So I really feel like there's a handful of groups I'm in connection with that are pushing this forward, but it was a good first step, when they criminalized the plant that was the most beneficial plant on the planet for 90 years. But I think we need to abolish a lot of the rulings on this. Farmers don't need to lose their crop because of a 0.03, component. No one's growing hemp to try to sell marijuana. Nobody. And so I think we're in the infancy stage, and there's a lot of room to grow, but it's at least a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Stephen. Would you like to also speak a bit about SDG bonds related to financing hemp projects and natural capital accounting?
Yeah, Marty said it really well. This needs to be a regional investment option into hemp production. Nowhere has the processing and manufacturing set up, so to really do it on a regional level is, I think, a good strategy. And we've been developing the framework for the first hemp bond, Sustainable Development Goal hemp bond. And so imagine a community could allocate and raise funds and micro invest into their own hemp production, which would go into the manufacturing and the actual cultivation of hemp. And then the hemp would pay back the bond, and the community would be the primary beneficiary. Rather than looking for outside capital with $100 million to build a facility, why not have the local people do it? And so that's one of the passions and projects I'm working on, is how to set up these other financial instruments to get large capital in on from a micro standpoint and have the communities benefit. And been working on that for a while and talking with groups like Climate Bonds, and I'm ready for that to go. And I can put some more information out there around that. And then the other finance vehicle that I'm super passionate about is it's around natural capital accounting. And natural capital accounting is around a 25-year study through the World Bank and UN and many universities that simply states that the more you improve the ecosystem, the more valuable it's worth. And I have a network of groups that have been working on tracking the data, the carbon sequestered, the oxygen produced, the biodiversity created, water purified, storm surge protection, medicine, food produced. All these things are value metrics under this accounting principle. And it just so happens that hemp is probably one of the most beneficial plants under these accounting principles as well. Not only when you look at the carbon getting sequestered more than trees and the oxygen, but when you use less water than counter crops, when you use less chemicals, when you don't have to mine for oil, when you don't have to chop down your trees for paper, all of these things are going to be additional value metrics under this accounting principle. And we have a group of pioneers in the space in the digital currency and blockchain realm that are putting together the protocols and the frameworks to track all these impacts and put it on a ledger and just record doing good, and that should be the currency of the future. If you can just go around improving wildlife and making money from the regenerative practices.
Thank you, Stephen. So let me just back here for a minute. Now, I'd like to hear from Bert James a bit as well about some of the projects he's involved with and the business development process related to Root to Flower, what that has been like so far. So I'm just going to start again and ask that question a bit more formally so that we can use it for the summit footage. Thank you so much, Stephen. Bert, I'd like to hear from you as well in terms of what your business development process has been like. Can you share a little bit more about your journey with us, where you're at now, where you want to be, and what the future will look like for Roots to Flower and your local community?
I guess, is my audio now working? Very good. So I took the 5 years, again, we have 5 years in this process. And what I found out that was missing were markets, were POs. And that was primarily, at the time, it wasn't for CBD, it was for more the food and fiber aspect. So what I have done now is decided we kind of took that on our own shoulders, much like the vertical integration you hear Jesse and Rachel speak of. I have immersed myself in projects, and we created a Root to Flower group to potentially focus all those projects in one direction so that they could all be measured and that they would work in harmony. So I think the most important thing that I have done is I gave my young partner, Tonio Carrillo, majority ownership in that Root to Flower LLC because I'm that confident marketing the crop and having sales and an outlet is important. So I would recommend that to anybody in the industry moving forward without a real hard, at least an estimate on your market, you know, what it can sustain, what it can support. There's really no need to grow the crop unless you're very wealthy. And, you know, jokingly, and it's no joke, but a crop that gets burned or a crop that gets destroyed, that's the least regenerative thing you could ever hope to accomplish, right? So there's actually that planning process is where we squarely are as far as business development. Marty has not mentioned it, but we've got a Simple Simon, 2021 t-shirt project where we're going to weave together regenerative cotton, locally grown with hemp, and then we're going to send that to the Piedmont portion or western portion of our state, and we'll have a turnkey North Carolina grown and sewn t-shirt. And I was real adamant, like, so what does a t-shirt cost? You know, let's go for it. Like, starting from the cover crop. Think about that for a minute. You know, add the cost of the cover crop into the t-shirt. That's where this conversation has to evolve. And that's what Marty's talking about in this interconnectivity. So that's a great example, great people. We're all like-minded. I work on a project in Wisconsin where we're doing biomass classification, where we're actually taking the crop and stripping it down and measuring the different quantities of each element of the plant, hemp in particular, you know, flower, seed, stem, stalk, hurd, you know, bass fiber conversation. And we feel like that will be valuable moving forward for the market generation. What market has to support the next market, and just having a systematic approach where everything is the true nature of regenerative mindset, where everything works to support the next thing and the next thing. So beyond that, you know, Tonio's, we've got health and wellness products, but that's the foundation of our brand, is that, hey, these things make you feel better, but don't you want the earth to feel better too? You know, that's kind of where it starts. So that's a bit of a ramble, but you can tell we're still stringing together each element of the market, and that just takes time and effort. The 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. days that your better half doesn't like.
Thank you, Bert. So I think we covered financing vehicles. Stephen, did you mean financing vehicles as in different types of deal structures beyond just equity deals?
No, I was referencing the Sustainable Development Goal Bond and the micro investments through the natural capital accounting components.
Oh, okay, but I think that was covered, right? And I think we're pretty much at our limit right now in terms of the schedule time. So we're on my side, it's till 6:30, so it's till 12:30 Eastern. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything before we go? Just being cognizant of everyone's time so that I don't kind of impose the conclusion element. Just if anyone else wants to add their own message, please feel free to do so now.
I just, want to add and that this was so helpful. And I think, having an open line of conversation with the, stakeholders, right? With the hemp farmers and producers, with capital, and just having an open discussion about how we can be most helpful, I think is such a wonderful way forward. And thank you, Miriam, for facilitating this today.
Yeah, I would say ditto to that. And, multi-stakeholder collaborations and just opening these conversations are what is really missing in a lot of industries. And that's how we can come up with new ideas and new ways to do it. So thank you, Miriam. So appreciate it. And appreciate you.
Yeah, we really appreciate the insight, with us kind of working many different sectors of the hemp industry, being the manufacturers, the cultivators. This was incredible insight on, moving forward, whether, we want to achieve impact of investing ourselves. It was awesome to hear from Bert, who's, launching his brand. You're going to have long nights, but it's worth it to have, that outlet to be able to sell your products and, hopefully in turn make a larger impact in your community and in turn in your soil. So I think it's incredible that you're launching your brand. But thank you, Marion. This has been awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Marty, Marty, we heard from Marty. So Bert and Stephen, any final message that you want to get across?
I'll quickly say that it's conversations like this, they're important, but it's our job to make sure that they're not just conversations. I think groups like this can create a measured approach because it's so huge, and we know that the job and the task is complex. It's all over the place. I mean, it's Mother Nature at the end of the day. So I think this group and this conversation, we have the ability to just create the first small steps and execute those properly. And then that will lead to the next bigger steps that we all want to see. And I think right now you're just seeing these huge swings being taken at it, right? And right now, if we're not careful, it's just going to be a buzzword and a market share. And so I think to maintain the authenticity of the conversation, which you are trying to do when you have all these players at the table, is of the utmost importance. And then to imagine that some of these conversations might lead to real world outcomes, such as investment in the space. It's very exciting. So thank you for the time, and hope to have more of these conversations.
Yeah, and I'll just say, hemp, and hemp, and the more that this word gets out there of what the plant can do and how we all collaborate together is part of my life's work, and I'm really honored and glad to be a part of the conversation and help drive it forward. And have a great hemp day.
Thank you, everyone. And I really hope that we can collaborate afterwards, not just because of the conference, but simply because of the amazing synergy between all of us. And the fact that I think what we have in common is that we're all very independent, and we're pioneering new approaches in different ways of developing our businesses. We're doing things that haven't been done before between this group, and it would be really great to continue and leverage off each other's experience and energy and passion for hemp and regenerative agriculture, and also the element of integrating impact finance and redefining what it means to bring finance and regeneration together. So thank you so much to everyone, and I look forward to continuing this conversation, hopefully in person as well, and on an ongoing basis through our social network channels. Hope to see you all there. And one of the elements that I found particularly inspiring was the idea of farmers sharing videos. I think more farmers need to create high quality content. So Stephen, call to action. Everyone here, call to action, please create content courses. We need to get more of these videos out there. The world needs to hear your stories and see practical examples of your work, and be able to learn from the content that you put out there. So I look forward to seeing more of that. Thank you, everyone, and let's jump off this call and move on with our day. I know we all are very busy, and I appreciate everyone's time. Oh, thank you. David, I'm going to add everyone to a Slack group afterwards, okay? So there will be a Rosham Network Slack, and then with separate working groups. So you can exchange contact information there. There's one particular channel that is specifically for speakers at the summit. And then we'll set up another one for regenerative agriculture as well. So anyone who wants to stay on there can. And if not, don't worry about it, but at least you can jump on there and exchange contact info without having to rely on email. I'm sure everyone's going through email exhaustion right now. I know I am. Too many emails. I wish it didn't exist, to be honest. I wish we could just come up with another more innovative way to communicate. All right, thank you, everyone.
Cheers, bye.